We now go above and beyond the headlines with Justice Undersecretary and spokesman Mark Perete. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Newsnight.
Hi, good evening.
So there are many questions about whether a verbal order should have followed a written order or a document, something in black and white. Should there have been one before the president made that announcement?
There is no specific form for a directive from the president, but the verbal instructions of the president were, I think, followed by the PNP as well as the DOJ when the secretary has ordered an investigation into the alleged corruption activities in the PCSO.
Well, after that announcement by the president, in the hours following that, there were several pronouncements from the palace and other government officials, in part saying that a written order would be forthcoming na merong dokumento na susunod. So is there one already, or and what form will it take?
As of now, the Department of Justice, and I'm only speaking for the department, we haven't received any written order with respect to the PCSO matter. But if Malacanang has said that a formal order is forthcoming, then it probably is.
Probably is?
Yes.
Okay. Earlier, Senator Bongo was quoted as saying that the reason why the president spoke about the massive corruption in PCSO and ordered the closure was because he had, because of yung parang sumbong ba? Tama ba yun? Let me get the exact quote from the script. No? So Senator Bongo revealing PCSO General Manager Rowena Garma had asked for the president's help to close down all PCSO gaming operations to curb corruption. Did you know about this, sir?
No, we are not privy to the report from the PCSO to the Office of the President. But what we do understand is that the PCSO is directly under the Office of the President. And as the Secretary of Justice has already clarified, the privilege granted to PCSO franchises is just that, a privilege. And so, like any other privilege, it can be withdrawn at any time by the authority, in this case, the Office of the President.
The PCSO franchise can be withdrawn anytime by the Office of the President, as opposed to like a legislative franchise, for example, for a broadcasting company, for example, na binibigay ng Congress. Ganun po ba? That's what you're saying. So, at any time, without any warning, without any investigation or results of an investigation, pwedeng bawiin ng presidente dahil nasa ilalim niya yung ang PCSO ang anumang prangkisa.
Yeah, what needs to be clarified here, I think, is the very concept of the franchise given by PCSO. No? And in many Supreme Court decisions, the highest court of the land has clarified that it is a privilege. And since it is a privilege, it can be withdrawn at any time. Of course, there are instances when the withdrawal is based on certain violations. And in fact, I think in this particular case, the president has likewise predicated the withdrawal or the suspension, if you would call it that, of the privilege on the basis of violations of the agreement with respect to the remittance, which is supposed to be made by those franchisees to the PCSO and to the government in particular. So we are not saying that here it's a unilateral withdrawal. It would seem that it's predicated on violations of certain conditions under which the franchise was granted. But the very nature of the franchise itself, which is characterized as a privilege, would lend it susceptible to withdrawal by the authority which granted it.
So if there were violations, if halimbawa hindi nagre-remit, sino ba dapat yung nag-file ng kaso sa mga lotto franchises na yon or yung ibang gaming schemes? Ang PCSO?
Yeah, I think we need to clarify yung criminal aspect niya, which needs a complainant. Okay. And then the administrative aspect, which may relate to the suspension of the franchise or even the withdrawal of such franchise. Yung admin aspect, which relates to the withdrawal or suspension of the franchise, is a prerogative given to the one granting the privilege, which is the Office of the President. or the PCSO by extension. But the filing of the criminal case, which requires an investigation, a case build-up, and a filing of a complaint, would have to follow due process requirements, precisely because there is a penal and punitive aspect to it.
So yun lang ang kailangan sumunod sa, like you said, due process requirements. Pero yung when the president, the office of the president revokes that franchise or withdraws it, hindi kailangan ng due process, hindi na kailangang ipaliwanag sa kanila. Dahil nga privilege ito. Ganun po ba? Is that how we're supposed to understand
the nature, yes. By its nature, that would be accurate, no? But again, as we said, in this case, it is predicated, the withdrawal or the suspension of the franchise seems to be predicated on a violation of the agreement itself. Now, as to whether there's going to be an investigation on the extent of the violation, that would remain a presidential prerogative.
Earlier today, also the Supreme Court, through the Court Administrator Midas Marquez, had ordered all courts, clerks of court, judges, courts and clerks of court to submit yung mga kaso, no, that have to do with this matter. At the same time, Sal Panelo talked about how courts also, could issue TROs to stop, for example, yung mga closing down ng mga lotto outlets na ito. How are we supposed to understand those statements? What is the government trying to say kapag sinasabi nila yon?
Well, I would have to defer comment on that because I'm not privy to the directive from the court administrator to the RTCs or other courts, no.
But how do I guess Secretary? Sorry, na-promote kita. Yusek Perete. What maybe I'll rephrase it, no. Yung mga korte ba, are there courts that could get in the way by issuing a TRO? Ganun ba yan? To stop the withdrawal of the franchise or the closing down of these outlets?
Yeah.
Is that what they're trying to avoid?
I think yung holder ng franchise can go to the courts and ask for relief from the courts, no? But the courts would have to follow the jurisprudence established by the Supreme Court, which in most parts has declared these franchises to be privileged. Of course, to be a mere privilege. There are a few instances when the Supreme Court has categorized a franchise as a contract, but franchises given by the PCSO for the most part has been declared as a mere privilege by our courts. And our lower courts are duty-bound to uphold that line of thinking declared by the Supreme Court.
But should we also look at them as, para bang negosyo din ito? So paano po yun? If it is a business, can the franchise be revoked unilaterally without due process? Because, like you say, it is a privilege. That's the way the administration sees it. Because you say there have been violations.
Well, any business assumes certain risks, and the characterization of this franchise as a privilege is one such risk that is inherent in the very character of the agreement. So, on the part of the holders of the franchise, they are presumed to have known the very nature of that privilege and the risks that attach to it.
Okay. My final question, Yusek Perete, before the President made that announcement midnight over the weekend, did the Justice Department know that he was going to do that? Or did you learn about it after he made the announcement?
We were not privy to any prior communication regarding the PCSO matter.
All right. Yusek Mark Perete, the Justice Department spokesperson for that department. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.